Hi.
Hi, Mason. Oh, there I see you. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How have you been?
No, I'm fine, thank you. It's wonderful to meet now on Zoom because the last time we saw each other was you on your balcony and I
You were
screaming
a few
directions
floors
from the
down.
street.
Yeah. Yeah, well, great to see you up close, so to say.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I saw on Facebook that you did something in Berlin, I remember, and I was too late to catch you there because you were already back. But
Yeah, I'm sorry
yeah,
about that. I was traveling pretty much for 2 days straight. I had just come from the US. I visited my family
mm,
for about 2 months,
yeah,
and I hadn't seen them for more than 2 years actually because of
oh,
couldn't
mm,
couldn't go to see them. And I had flown back to Vienna and didn't even leave the airport. Had to stow a bunch of baggage and then flew right to Berlin. And
yeah.
then on the next morning, I had this competition. So yeah, I'm sorry it didn't work out,
No,
but
that's fine. But how was the what was this competition and did you learn
it's
anything there or tell me
uh,
something?
well, I was I was a little bit um, conflicted about whether or not I wanted to go through with it, just because
Mm,
of the rather complicated travel situation
yeah.
before that, and it was not entirely certain that it would be possible. I mean, the competition is called the International Competition for Young Conductors
Mm,
in Besançon. Besançon is the city in France, and they every 2 years they have this major international competition where they send out juries
mm.
to different cities in the
Oh,
world,
yeah.
and they audition people
Mm,
personally, or they call that the preliminary rounds.
mm.
And those who get through to the next round then take part in the competition in Besançon, France. And they had planned everything to happen in April, for April and May. Originally, they have one in Montreal, in Paris, in Berlin, in Shanghai. So they have
Over.
these different little satellite
Mm,
auditions throughout the world. And usually, what's different about this competition is that
mm.
they don't really care what you look like on video. Most
Oh,
competitions will require that you send at least some kind of video material before they
mm,
approve your participation in the competition.
mm,
And what I really like about this is that
mm,
they want to see you in person. They want to see how you work with
mm.
people, your energy in the room. And although it was only with two pianos,
Mm.
it's still, I mean, I think at least I was trained this way. You can learn a lot from someone, and
Mm.
you can really, uh, you can tell what kind of skills a conductor has,
Mm.
even if they specialize in orchestral music,
Mm.
by how they work just with even two musicians in the
Oh, yeah.
room.
Mm.
And that was really something that attracted me to it. I mean,
Mm.
right now I graduated in October, and I'm
Mm.
applying for everything right now.
Uh,
So
yeah.
this particular competition was something that I was aware of in years past, and
Mm.
said, no, I'm not really ready to do that. But this year, I thought, okay, this is the time to do it. And Berlin is closest to Vienna, most
Yeah.
easily accessible to Vienna. So I jumped on it as soon as they opened up the registration, and it was a good thing too, because they closed it after 1 day. I mean, I was just watching the spots tick down over the course of the day, yeah, I mean, this you just have to imagine that the past year there's been such a backup in more conductors coming on the scene. There were already too many of them anyway to begin with, and now there are even more. And so, I mean, you can only imagine people were just like had been hold ready to rear end to go. So after a day, all the spots were taken, and but I was lucky to get one earlier in the day, and that they had planned on everything happening in April, and as it was getting closer to April, it became apparent that that was just not going to happen. I mean, with the people, as smart as it is for them to have these separate auditions spread out all over the world, it's just people still have to travel to them. Across, and it was just looking very unrealistic that people were going to be able to reliably make the audition. And so they decided to postpone it. They kept a few different auditions. I'm not sure exactly where. The ones that were later on, like the beginning of May, I think in Paris and in Besançon itself, they left the auditions where they were supposed to have been originally scheduled. But Berlin was postponed to the beginning of July. And I said, okay, well, that was the last thing that I had really imminently in the. So, and I had been, I had been working on the repertoire for several weeks at that point, and thinking, okay, well, maybe I'll just fly home, see my parents, get my vaccination. Because at that point it was still not very far along here, and I could choose what kind of vaccination I got, and so I flew home, saw them, got my vaccination, had a really wonderful time in the U.S. And then I got this notification that they had a window at the beginning of July. It was about of 4 or 5 days of when I could potentially have my audition. And I took a rather big risk and decided that I was going to stay until the end of June with my parents, because God knows when I'm going to be back there. And it ended up being nearly the worst case scenario. So so I had to fly overnight. One of the worst overnight flights that I've ever had, which was 8.5 hours or so, absolutely fully booked. I mean, you can't really imagine how. I mean, even in this time where, I mean, people are getting a little bit more comfortable. Vaccination rates are up and everything, but even that surprised me that so many people were willing to travel in that overnight flight. And it was booked up, and probably half with babies or children under 5, and it was just not really the most flight. So I hoped I'm getting some sleep there. It didn't really, but then the next day I arrived in Vienna, right to Berlin, and then the next morning had this audition. But it was very modest, actually, the whole setup of the thing. It was in the Institut Français in Berlin. And we went up to this room, and about 6 or 7 other candidates in the room, and they had split into a morning and an afternoon session. And I was in the morning session, and they had told us originally that we would draw numbers for the order in which we would conduct. They didn't do that. I was already on the list as the first one, so I essentially arrived there, had about 5-10 minutes to gather my stuff together, and then we all went up and we got introduced to the jury, and then the rest of the candidates went out, and I did probably about 15-20 minutes with the pianist. The jury was composed of two conductors, and then there was a person who sort of ran the show and was in charge of ringing the bell for when your time was up. And then the two pianists in the room, and that was it. And I had to wear masks up until the point where we started conducting, which is actually not a foregone conclusion. Sometimes people do have to, even now, still have to conduct in masks.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, I think so. Yeah, especially with, in fact, for, I saw that you talked to Alexei Mikhayenko and then Christian Spatar, who were studied with my teacher at MDV, and when they were rehearsing the RSO, they had to conduct in masks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I mean it's different everywhere, but like just not, it's not a sure thing that you get to not conduct in masks, but yeah.
But Mason, you are one of those students that I really felt for, because you graduated in the pandemic, in that year of the pandemic, and I really, there were quite a few that I photographed and that I spoke to as well, and that that uncertainty of what's going to happen, or it was almost for me that I could understand that final year and then moving on to a career or a professional career, that you didn't have that, and that now you have to go a different route, and of course even I can imagine that, even like you say, these competitions and even auditions and things are so much different, because it's with restrictions, with the mask, so it's completely different to how you are used to it. And correct me if I'm wrong, if you have a year of lockdown behind you, for any artists in normal circumstances, I can imagine that it's also difficult to get on stage again and do it. And yet for you in this situation, it must be very difficult and daunting almost to think, okay, what's the next step, and where am I going to end up now?
Yeah, well, thank you for thinking of me. I really appreciate that you spent this last year and a half trying to keep us all on people's radar screens, so to say, in social media and all of that. You can't. One of the reasons why I felt like I really had to do this no matter what, no matter how jet lagged and exhausted I was, how unprepared I felt, was because I did not know when I would get the opportunity to do it again. And I certainly hadn't done it for several months. I mean, I did a little recording at the beginning of May for another competition, actually. But other than that, I hadn't struck a beat since October, since my graduation concert, and that I think is part of the job. I mean, especially when you start out. I mean, you can't imagine how many of us there are now, conductors. I mean, there's just. I'm sure I don't even know the scope to which people are being put out into the world as conductors, or claiming that they are conductors. but it's when you look at the applications, and sometimes they do release the numbers for the applications for various positions or competitions, and they're just like staggering, right? In 500, 400. I mean, people who feel that they're ready to start in this career. And so I don't think it's that unusual. I'm not saying it's particularly comfortable, but I don't think it's that unusual that people the first year out of school are sitting on their hands a little bit. I mean, that's what I tell myself, to not go crazy. But you have to engage your mind in other ways, and learning repertoire that you wish you could have learned, you wish you had time to learn during your studies, is one of those things. Taking advantage of opportunities to conduct, even though they might not be ideal, or even just make music. Period. I think that that's a kind of, I don't necessarily want to say status quo, but it's definitely not unheard of. And when you're, especially in our program at this university here, it's so much all the time. If you want to make it that, if you want to learn everything that you can during these 5 years here, and that was also a very important thing for me to really make it only last as long as it's supposed to last, 5 years. Many people go for several years after that, but if you're really concerned with making that happen and getting as much out of it as you can, you don't have a whole lot of time for outside other things. Some people need to do outside engagements for financial reasons. I'm lucky enough I didn't have to do that, but some people have to do that, and I understand that. But I said, I'm here. I came all the way over just for this 5 years. I'm going to make it happen. And I didn't have a whole lot of extra headspace for putting myself out into the world, doing extra auditions, because I also didn't really necessarily consider myself a polished musician or conductor at that point in the middle of my studies. I wanted to pack everything in, say, okay, this is what the program is making out of me, and the product at the end is more or less what I want to contribute in my career going forward. And not a lot of people have that perspective, and that it probably explains to some degree. I mean, of course, the pandemic has had a big effect on that, at least on my my outlook. Wasn't what anyone was expecting, but I felt I felt that I wanted to wanted to wait to at least until my last year to start ramping up the things that I was doing business wise. And now, I haven't really been terribly active in the past year, and it's hard to assign reasons to why that is, because I do think that there are a lot of people. I do think a lot of people would be in my position anyway. After university.
But I think it's with everybody. I mean, it's not just with musicians and with artists, but it's also with most people that some people just need time in a different way, and use time in a different way, you know, that something doesn't always have to be immediately, but that sometimes time brings out something in you that that you might need for the future. So I strongly believe that everything has a time, you know, that for some people it takes a different time period, but that in the end, when you look back, that I even this year of the pandemic, I see in this way that it was a year that there will be something positive for everybody that came out of this, because you know, we had time, we didn't have other things, but we did have time. So it was,
I think that's one of the most positive things about this whole thing, is that people had a moment to sit back and were forced to think about the world and how they interact with other people, the importance of the things that they do in their life on an everyday basis, and also long term.
Yeah.
And for me, I hope that kind of reevaluation, at least in our industry, has a lasting positive effect. Now it's sort of difficult to tell. I mean, things are, at least generally from my observational perspective, it's not terribly restricted right now. Concerts are happening all over the place, in the US as well as in Europe, and seem to be relatively well visited as well. And I think that performing arts are really doing okay at the moment. And this is just a year of build up, of wanting both from the performer's perspective, ready to go, ready to show something, and also and especially you notice in Vienna, and audiences need for this after deprivation for and so it's hard to analyze what kind of long-term systemic changes might come from this whole thing, but they're sort of riding a wave right now, and this is as good as anything else, and just enjoy it.
But I do think I mean, I've said that throughout the time that I've spoken also to students, that I do think the musicians who starting out in their career are almost on the best place, because you are, like they say, on a rock bottom. You are starting out. So anything from here on is growing, and you know, it's moving forward and it's growing. Whereas I think it's also difficult for you know, or the time was difficult for musicians who were already established, and had now many things cancelled, and had to you know, try and figure out how they're going to move forward. And I almost think that you as young musicians will create a new path or a new sort of movement, because things will be, you will have to do things differently than it has been done, because of course it's not the same industry that you left when the pandemic started. And I've spoken about this to many conductors as well, and many professors, music professors, and they do also agree with that you will start something that we possibly will in a few years' time look back on and say, well, this was a new movement that started because of this situation, or because of this pandemic.
Well, I think there's something to that. I would go as far to say that there are many things that needed to be changed far before the pandemic, and the pandemic sort of pushed a little reset button on this whole thing. And like I said, I don't know how much that's going to stick, but I hope that it does get people thinking a little bit differently about how this, well, machine is probably a little bit too generous a word, but it is really it's an industry of classical music, and it should hopefully, if nothing else, prompt people to realize how important, even in classical music, where you have recordings of the pieces that you're going to see and have heard these recordings a million times before, that you still recognize the importance of live performance and what that brings. And that's something that you can't really capture in a CD in your living room at home, or people don't listen to CDs anymore anyway, or Spotify, whatever. I'm not sure that the pandemic was long enough for that kind of reason. I hope it was, but it's a long development that, at least before the pandemic, I couldn't really see a clear turnaround for. You know what I mean? And I'd like to think that the pandemic was long enough and serious enough for people to realize how necessary that is, and what benefits you get from witnessing music live. And even if it's something that you've heard 100 times, and something that is often, unfortunately, prohibitively expensive, at least in the classical music world, but that need and that interaction of audience's desire to see something live and see the performance and get the full spectrum of overtones that you get in the concert hall, and feel the energy of 100 people in front of you really giving their best. A new worth is put on that now. But also, living in Vienna, it's a little bit of a bubble, because they really treat their cultural elements here better than most places, I think.
Well, yeah, this is, but this is very important, and this is why I do this, have this platform where I believe that artists should speak and talk about the art that we see, the people behind the art, not just the music, but that we see the people bringing this music, because of the 500 artists I photographed, and all the different conductors and all the different pianists and flutists and dancers and all of them, you all have your own character, and you all brought something to a window, just a plain window frame, or like you did on your balcony. Everybody did something that was so unique to them, and for me, this is also what I think is what artists are about, that even if you get thousands of pianists, that every pianist has their own character, has their own way of doing it. And this is so important that we understand, or the audience, this as well, that it's not just about the music, but that it's the people that bring us the music, the artists that bring the music. And so, yeah, this is the idea this is how I got the idea, that I just thought.
It's a wonderful idea.
Pardon?
I'd say it was a wonderful idea, and I'm honored to take part in it.
No,
I hope I've given you something relatively interesting here.
Well, no, it's about what you think and how you feel, and I think it needs to be heard and said, and I think these interviews that I do is also I strongly believe in energy, and this is how I ran this whole project, is that I didn't force anybody to come on it, and I didn't and I went by what Facebook offered me and and suggested to me, and the feeling that I got from people, and I do think you might say something in this interview that somebody in it could also be that somebody in a few years' time would need to hear, or would be in the same situation and have the same thought process as you do, and need to hear that. And things we put out on the internet at the moment it's so wonderful to think. I mean, I've listened to interviews that with other people or on other subjects that was done 10 years ago, but it's still relevant today, or that you still listen to and you think, okay, well, this person has also been through this, and look, where are they now? And this is why I think this, this is just like you put it out there and you say and you wish. And now I can ask you this: what is your wish?
What is my wish?
Yeah, tell me your wish. I must say, on record, there have been people who have wished on my interviews, and their wishes have come true. Not exactly how they wished, but in a way, something happened. So let me hear your wish.
Well, I'm going to go for a modest but selfish wish.
Go for it.
I will come to conduct more in this coming season than I did in the last season.
Okay. But be more specific. What do you want to conduct? You have to be specific for this wish of window. What is your favorite music or conducting pieces?
Oh, Petra, it's not like that with me, really. I don't really care what it is. I enjoy. First of all, I believe that the choosing favorites boxes you in.
Oh, okay.
And restricts you to a kind of bias about whatever it is that you're passionate about. And I think that, at least for me, I can have things that I like and that I love, but I don't really go as far to say that anything is my favorite, because I like to keep myself open to being influenced by other things that might come by that are in the same genre that someone has put in, into which someone's put the same amount of work and energy and passion. So I couldn't tell you what favorite thing is to conduct, but my favorite thing to do is conducting. I can tell you that.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
the whole process of it, of getting an assignment, something to do, and curating this this piece that someone has toiled over, and building it in my mind, based on what I know about the person, and based on what I know about the principles of music and drama, to then bring that out and work with other people in front of me, other people who are just as eager and in most cases more talented than I am, to bring this to sound is really, I think, one of the best things in the world. And
really,
I don't blame other people for wanting to do it, because it's just
it's wonderful.
so great.
Yeah. So when you do this, when you study the piece, can you already sort of imagine how it's going to sound and what, how do you study it? Do you just study it for what it is, or do you see the final result of it?
Well, you can't, maybe there are some people who can do this, but at least the way I was trained to do it, and the way that the process that I chose to stick with is taking the score, playing it on piano, the stuff that you can't play on piano, you sing, or trying to get into your mind some other way by tapping it or counting it or whatever. I mean, there are different strategies for different genres, but the idea is to bring what you have written in front of you into your mind somehow, and you have various tools to do that based on what our education is here. They really attack that from all angles: ear training, singing, playing scores on the piano. I mean, there are dozens of different ways to approach it, and depending on what the repertoire is, I will sort of take different approaches. But you essentially try to make what you have in front of you musical and make sense based on your knowledge of music history, what the composer was like, what they were going through at that time, what world history was like at that time, other pieces that you may know from that composer, other composers that composer maybe admired or admires.
Okay, so it's not just about the piece that you're doing. So you really have to research and have to delve in other things as well too.
Well, yeah, that's really the ideal scenario. And now conducting has become a little bit more of a jet setting, jumping in all over the place, and so. And all the time. And as soon as you get an opportunity, even if it's week after week, every day, or every other day, doing something new, then I think interpretation tends to suffer in that respect, because you generally, what you do is you put on your headphones and you listen to someone else's version of the piece.
Oh, okay.
And you learn the piece that way, and you make it work for the orchestra so that it sounds nice and that no one goes home unhappy, or very few people go home unhappy, and it's entertaining. But it doesn't have a whole lot of substance behind it. Or it might have emotional substance behind it, because usually the music is brilliant, and the people who are playing it are brilliant, and the conductor is either very good or in some cases brilliant, and they really they just love music, and they love the experience of making music. But I do think that if you have the time, you have an obligation to build up something from within yourself, from what you know, what you can do, and then bring that and see how that plays with everyone else's expectations of a piece. And that's my process. I currently have a lot of time to do that, and I've always also made the time to do that during my studies, with varying results. But I think that that's something that is really missing from this you could say genre or industry, depending on how deep you want to assume that this problem goes. But it seems to me like a lot of people prepare their things whether it's instrumentalists or conductors, with headphones on, listening to how someone else does it, because the pressure is very high to succeed. And rather do something that is slightly unoriginal, but still sounds great because the material is great, than risk something falling flat because it's really new or unexpected. I mean, the way people did it, 70, 80 years ago, where the classical music is a longer history of performing that way than it does the way we prepare things right now. And I'm not entirely sure that is the right way to go forward, but it's seriously ingrained in how my colleagues prepare for performances.
So you enjoy this research part and looking into, like you say, the connection of the composer and what the composer was living and so on.
Sure. That's the kind of, well, I don't want to say that's the fun part, because that sort of implies that the rest of it is not fun. But that's the kind of leisurely part. That's the thing I can sit down at the end of the day and read a few Wikipedia articles or a biography about, and it's not there are no rules to how you can enrich your understanding of a piece, and some things might be completely wrong. And I think that is, or your assumption. What I mean is your assumption about the background of a composition might be completely wrong, and that is part of the risk that you take. And some musicians with whom you work might refuse it, or just shrug it off, not go with you on it. But I think the time to think about that seriously is in your home, or your workspace, when you're preparing a piece, putting a piece together, and you ask yourself, okay, why do I instinctively want to do this? What's the reason for my natural playing when I just sight read something through? Why does that happen? And I'm constantly asking myself that question, and then trying to come up with reasons. And most people might say it's complete BS, and it might be, but when I stand in front of people and tell them how I think it should go, which is the role of a conductor, whether or not most conductors will admit that, that is a part of your job. I believe that you should have a very good reason for telling people that that's the way it should be, and that's the way you want it, and that's the way it works. And that, I think, is best achieved when you have worked through the logical process in your mind, sitting alone with your scores and a piano, and you question yourself, natural tendencies, and then build that again from the ground up.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you there, because I think, for example, if I think of the work of Charles Rennie Mackintosh, for example, and he was a designer and the architect. If you look at his designs and his architecture, you cannot really appreciate it before you understand why he did it and what inspired him and how his mind was thinking while he did it. And I always think that I love a story behind the things that I hear or see, because I do think it then makes you listen differently or see differently. And I actually like it when musicians do that also in concert, that they talk about, and even if they talk about why it why they love it, you know, because at the moment you start talking about something that you love and you almost give that appreciation over to somebody else to say, this is why I love it. Can you understand why I love it? Or can you see why I love it? And this is exactly what you're talking about. But this is something that you should aspire still to do, because I think this will be something that would be a part of your identity of you as a conductor, you know? Yeah.
That is my goal for sure. Yeah. I can't really imagine any other way of working. I want to continue to work and conduct.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
If there are some situations in which I have to put on a set of headphones and listen to a recording because there's no other way to do it, I think I'll probably opt for that. But my ideal way of working, and what I hope to be allowed to continue to do, is work like this, because I think that that's where the variety and the honest future of this genre lies. And it's a difficult thing, because I'm now staring at another at least 2 months in my calendar where I have absolutely no musical engagement. I mean, I'm stepping in for a friend to rehearse a choir tomorrow, but other than that, it's a completely empty calendar. And if someone comes to me and said, "Okay, 2 days, we need you to conduct something you've never done before, you have no idea about," and I have the option to say yes or no, I'm really going to have to think long and hard about how to proceed procedurally with that, because it's I can prepare my things with recording. I can do that. I can make it work like that. I just think that I'm in a privileged position to have done this program here in Vienna, been given all the tools to do that, and that if I have the option to do it, then that is a much more authentic way than preparing what is essentially someone else's, or a combination of someone else's and another person's interpretation.
Yeah.
That's how I can't imagine myself doing it a different way, but I can if I need to.
Yeah. I have been talking to conductors and music teachers now, because there's a very unique masterclass where they put conductors and singers together. It's a combination, so that conductors and singers understand each other's roles in and understand. What do you think about this? Do you also with conducting opera, for example, do you think that would be a very good connection to have, or a communication to have with the singers?
Oh, sure. There are almost no bad experiences in that. You can learn some. At least my opinion on that is that you can learn something from everyone. Luckily, at MDV, we are required to take voice lessons from day one, and we do that every week. for 3 years.
Mm.
And I chose to do it an extra 2 years.
Mm.
And as an orchestra conductor, you have to do it a minimum of 3 years.
Mm.
If you're doing choir conducting, you have to take it all 5 years. But I felt like this is an opportunity to get into the mind of singers, how they prepare. My teacher was, or is, he still teaches there, still sings in opera productions, sings in the Volksopera, and he really, I probably wore down his patience a lot, because I'd never sung anything really, nothing seriously before I arrived here. And I think probably from year 3, I felt like, okay, I'm starting to understand this instrument, and that some people walk in the door at MDB and already, especially Austrians, who are often from choir culture. They grow up singing.
I see. Yeah.
It's a much different scenario here than it is in the US. So I'm sure they can walk in the door and have really, and know, at least instinctively, what's going on there. But I had no clue. And I was lucky enough to get a very patient teacher, and this speaks to why I continued to take lessons there for the entirety of my degree. That I felt like I was discovering an instrument that is one that I really have to know in order to effectively work with when I'm conducting an opera or whatever the case may be. This is an instrument that's, I mean, not to mention the other musically supportive benefits that you get from learning to sing. Just understanding the instrument itself is such a good thing to have in your education as a conductor, because you have to work with these people, and I'm really thankful that opportunity was available to me when I was studying here. And so this masterclass that you're talking about, I mean, if people are coming, if conductors are coming from a background in which they really don't have a whole lot of experience with singing themselves, getting one-on-one time with singers is, I think, one of the smartest things you can do, because it doesn't require a whole orchestra to be there. It's just, I'm usually a pianist, but it's just someone there who knows the mechanism, and especially with singers, you can because we all more or less possess this instrument, with singers, you can kind of, if you spend enough time with them, you can really feel where they are. You can sort of mirror the motoric and the physical aspects of what they do. And if you're really relaxed, they're willing to learn and open to what you might receive there. I think being at a master class with singers where you get a kind of back and forth about what each other does is a very good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting for me how much you have to all, know, and you have to understand, and even, it's not just what we see, this conductor standing in front of the orchestra. I think there are so many facets to your job or what you do. And it's so interesting to hear. And I'm fascinated with conducting because I think I see it in a way as if you bring all these sounds together into one sound. And I just love the idea of somebody having or being able to do that, you know?
Well, it's,
yeah.
I can't, we can't and certainly shouldn't take credit for that. The musicians do that. The people in the orchestra do that. They play together. It's our job to bring something to the table there, musically to the table. I think a lot of orchestras view the conductor position more and more as a slightly superfluous one.
Okay.
But I do believe in the power of that role, and the responsibilities behind that, I think, are much more than a lot of people, particularly conductors, give it credit for. And it's the greatest feeling in the world.
Really?
I can't say that enough. When it's working, when it's not working, it's one of the worst feelings in the world. But when it's working, it's really wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I so wish that I wish that your wish comes true to to stand in front of the orchestra soon. And I will definitely want to hear when that happens so that you can tell me about that. But otherwise, I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for your time, for talking to me.
Thank you.
And since I took your picture in the window, I've connected with your mum as well on Facebook.
Great.
And she's very proud of you, which is 100% right that she should be. Well, so, but have a lovely afternoon, and I really hope to hear from you soon again.
Thanks, Petra. Very nice talking to you.
Lovely talking to you too. Bye.